Hey Regret, have you ever accidentally said something so mind-blowingly hurtful that it haunted you later? I'll start. When I was in 8th grade, my papa-great-grandfather had just passed away. We were at my nana's house after the funeral and everyone was really sad. I have been a really happy and upbeat person my whole life and still am, and wanted to say something to cheer her up. So in front of my whole family after the funeral I said to my nana, well, how does it feel to be single after all of these years, as a joke. I have never wanted to take back words more in my entire life. OHS classmate mentioned that her great uncle and aunt's house exploded. I laughed because it seemed so absurd to me, and also I laugh when I don't know how else to react. They were inside the house at the time. Hey, well, this sure is awkward. I was meeting my dad's girlfriend for the second time and her 2 daughters for the first time. While we were eating cake, my dad's girlfriend was showing me a picture of her daughter and a cow. She said yeah, she won best of show at the county fair. I then replied with, which one? The cow or your daughter? Did I mention the cake was for her mom's birthday? The whole family was there. That's freaking hilarious, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Sitting next to my older female cousin as a child. I was probably 6. She was probably 15. Respectively, it was true, but I said, God, your thighs are big. I didn't understand why she was crying. This is honestly one reason I don't like being around small children. My feelings fear them. My very obese middle school teacher once asked the class what they thought her favorite restaurant was. I'm not sure why, but without thinking, I blurted out McDonald's. It took me a good 5 seconds to figure out why the class got so quiet. She kinda set herself up for that one. This is something I said in 3rd grade in a fit of rage, and I still regret it now. I'm currently in graduate school. I was arguing with a girl in my class, and I know her father had passed away about a year prior. From illness, I assume, but I can't honestly remember. There was the usual name calling, and then I said something that still haunts me. Well, at least I have a father. I didn't realize how hurtful that was until she was bawling. I think I got sent to the principal's office. I hope she has long forgotten about it. I'm not sure I ever will. My aunt had scrimped and saved for a baby doll carriage for me when I was 7. I threw a tantrum because it wasn't wrapped. I think I apologize every year at least once. I was about 11 years old, I think, and one of the class bullies was being a typical douche to me because I was just eating a hot dog and he said, you like that, don't you? You probably like sucking your daddy's dong too, to which I replied, well, if you had a dad you'd suck his dong. I don't know if his dad was dead or not, but I knew he was raised by a single mom. I saw tears well up in his eyes a little. Bullies seem to always have something like that going on at home. I know I did. Sometimes they need a kick in the nuts to shape up, though. Maybe you helped him improve. At my 5th birthday party, and my 2 best friends were their brothers, Black, lived across the street. When their mom came to take them home, my scumbag uncle told me it would be very funny to say bye. We didn't need any in here. Anyway, I had no idea what the word N meant, had never even heard it before, but I said it. Remembering the looks on their faces still makes me feel terrible. The younger brother cried a lot. Your uncle is a fuckface. Needed to be said. I was picking up a Nintendo 64 off Craigslist earlier this year. I rolled into a neighborhood filled with brightly and vibrantly colored houses. There were sherbet orange and hot pink and neon green, honestly hideous colors, and the lady comes out with her N64 and I'm looking it over to make sure it's all in working order. I say, what a colored neighborhood we have here, and she remained silent. As I was pulling back down the street, I noticed that there was a group of little black boys playing the yard down the street. I told a nice old black woman that she was colored. My ex-boyfriend was in a wreck a few years back when he lost control of his SUV and rolled it, killing his NGF. We were in a rush to go somewhere one day, and as I got in the car he starts driving. While I am putting on my seatbelt, I absent-mindedly say to him something like, "Oh there, slow down till I get my seatbelt on. What are you trying to kill me?" Oops. To be fair, you'd think he'd learn his lesson about being cautious. One day, I was sitting at lunch and jokingly told a guy his haircut made him look like a skinhead. Turns out he had cancer. Crap, that made me literally cringe. When my little brother was 11, He was fairly pudgy. All my other sisters would make fun of him because of it, and he developed a complex about it. I was the only one besides my other brother that said he would grow into it, and he's always looked up to me. One day when I was visiting, I was talking to my sisters and they made some joke about his weight. I can't remember it now, but it was one of those moments that just makes you laugh involuntarily. I kind one of those snorty laughs, and look over towards the front door, and my little brother is just standing there looking at me with the most saddest look on his face. Like the one person he would never expect to participate in teasing him had just done it. That look haunts me to this day, because I love him so much. And even now, that he did lose all the weight and is fairly confident, I will still remember that crushed look he gave me when he saw me laughing along. I think this was the best story I read in this thread. I almost said it was the worst story, but realized that might be accidentally hurtful. Thanks for writing it. Some guy, I have prostate cancer. Me. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear. SG, it's metastasized. Me. What's that mean? SG, it's all over. Me. Oh, that's fantastic. Row. Good. SG. Short look number. Me. Oh, it's all over that way. So, I mistook his pronoun when he explained that he is nearly dead. I thought he meant the cancer was all over. That's how pronouns work, right? It got me into a really awkward situation. I now know what metastasis is, and I'll never forget it. You didn't misunderstand the pronoun. You misunderstood the prepositional phrase as a colloquialism. When I was younger, my family and I were at some festival and we were supposed to see a performance called Feats of Strength. We were sitting in the area where it was supposed to happen and this older looking guy came up and started his act. Me, being a young kid, was expecting some young guy throwing around elephants or something. He invited me up to the front to participate in one of his feats. He tore a phone book in half and then held a heavy cast iron candle holder that held like 30 candles above his head with Coke cans balanced on it or something. I looked directly at him and asked, "When is the strong guy gonna be here? I feel so terrible about that now." This guy was like 55 or something and I just feel terrible for saying that. I hope it wasn't depressing for him. My brother was murdered in 2004. We got the typical community outpouring of grief food, so for a few days following the murder and funeral, people would come by the door with various potables and perishables, and we need to take shifts answering the door. When my turn came round, I was already sick of hearing "I was so sorry to hear," and hope this helps. In such a state of pain, it really doesn't help to hear. Eventually, a woman arrived with a freaking laundry basket full of bagels, jams, jellies, cream cheeses, and a few donuts were sprinkled in there as well, if I recall. She thrust this gracious load into my arms and said, as if to explain it, "I heard you had a big family." My head wasn't even in a true thought process. I was just ready to say whatever popped into my head, and that phrase was, "Yeah, it used to be bigger." The woman turned pale while, and I'm sure as soon as I shut the door, she must have run away as though she had just had a foyer encounter at the Munsters house. My family, upstairs, had witnessed this event unfold, and they burst out in laughter for the first time in days. What I said wouldn't hit me fully for another 20 minutes. That is hilarious. Your comment, not so much the murder thing. Last Christmas Day we were opening presents as a family when my brother got one that was clearly a wrapped up jumper. As a joke he said, "Well, what could this be? A dead cat." The family cat had died 2 days before and he has no idea why he said it. My grandma cried. Yes, back in the 5th grade there was this new girl that transferred to our school into my class. She was a pretty cool person from what I remember, but being the dong I was, I told her one day without provocation, "I wish you never transferred to this school." I had no idea it was going to be that hurtful. She started crying almost immediately. I don't remember seeing her again after that. Holy crap, I'm sad now. She's probably a homeless prostitute dropout now. Nice. I was in 7th grade at the time. I thought I was hot crap. Spiked hair, baggy pants, braces. There was a girl in my class who was objectively stupid. One day, I said something along the lines of, "You are so stupid, I often wonder if one of your parents was an ape." She was horrified and speechless, I thought, At the time, this was merely a result of my incisive wit. Years later I recalled an important detail that may have contributed to her being rendered so thunderstruck. She was black. While at secondary school, we had a police officer come in the run-up to bonfire night to speak about an incident that had occurred. Some kids had thrown fireworks into a deaf and blind people's home. I quote the police officer's words, "Can you imagine fireworks going off in a deaf and blind people's home?" Everybody burst out laughing. Felt guilty about it years later. Being young, everything was a joke. To be fair, that's a pretty funny way to word something like that. I was at my grandmother's house visiting with my family a couple of weeks ago. I was helping her clean out her garage when she told me that I should come live with her. My scumbag brain didn't adjust to family mode, and without even realizing it, my response was, "I'd rather be dead." Like I said, I didn't even realize what I had said until later when my dad brought it up. I felt horrible. Luckily he had explained to her that she wasn't the reason I didn't want to live down there. I was because it's out in the middle of nowhere with no technology, etc. Fast forward to a couple of days ago and my dad informs me that my grandmother has bought an overpriced laptop off of QVC and is getting the internet installed at her house, and it is going to cost her $60 a month. We are only down there around 3-4 times a year. This just makes me sad. A friend of mine came over all of a sudden and brought his brother who had Downs. Back then I was insanely insecure and insensitive too. I didn't know how my family would react. Sort of panicked and blurted out, "Sorry, we don't want his kind here." Probably the most horrible thing I've ever said, and I have apologized for that many times. I'm not that kind of person at all. I'm very open-minded and I love and tolerate. I don't know how it happened, but it was awful and I still think about it every now and then. Since then his brother has passed away. This was over 6 years ago now. Frick. My mum was leaving to go to hospital to have a tumor removed. As she walked out the door I hugged her and said, "See you on the other side." I meant the other side of the op, but she started crying thinking I meant the afterlife. Frick. When I was in 7th grade a friend of mine's mom died. Another kid in gym class started making "your mom" jokes to him and he was too sad to say do anything. So I kicked the little bastard's butt. Coach didn't even punish me. Teachers were so much cooler back then. I think if he had punched me in the face, I would have deserved it. A few years ago I was in a club with my mate, who said he had a new girlfriend. I spied a very large, unattractive girl at the bar across the room, and as a joke I said to him, "That's great as long as it's not ha ha ha." There was a long silence and then he said, "Actually, it is her." Face palm. She turned out to be a lovely girl who he went on to marry. They had a kid and made me godfather. Coming from a once fat and ugly girl, I just have to say, frick anyone who does this. We know you're pointing us out and laughing. It hurts. A friend of mine used to make fun of a girl in elementary school for being overweight. Our circle of friends didn't make fun of her, but we never defended her or reprimanded him. But we found out later in high school that she had developed severe anorexia and blamed him. He didn't remember even making the jokes. He didn't remember even making the jokes. I highly doubt that. When I was a kid, like 9, my little sister, like 6, was talking on the phone to my grandma and I stole the phone and told her to kiss my butt. I don't even understand. I love my grandma. I don't even know her reaction because I threw the phone across the room. I don't know why I did that. Woke up my roommates laughing. I don't know why that's so funny. Just the image, I guess. It's pregnant with funny. Yeah, grandma. Love yo. Snatch. Hey grandma. Kiss my butt. Toss his phone. When I was about 6, my sister, a year older than I, made me a present for Christmas. She's really into arts and crafts and still is to this day, but I remember opening the present from her, seeing the gift she had made me. I don't precisely remember what it was, some kind of doll or clay sculpture, and promptly said "that's nice," and threw it over my shoulder, then proceeded on to open more presents. I was expecting a Game Boy Color, which I actually got later that day from my aunt. She was crushed. She started crying and my parents gave me a serious talk about how even if we don't like the gift, we should appreciate the money, time, and effort people put into getting it for you because they care. Back then I just shrugged it off as a lecture, but it tears me apart today that I did that to her. She and I are best friends. When I was a kid, my family and I were picking up my brother's friend to go to the beach. We offered his mom to come with us, but she said she couldn't swim very well. Me, being about 5 or 6 years old, says, "Is it because you're fat and would sink?" Fat is actually pretty buoyant. I'm like 4 hours late, so I'm sure this will be lost, but it haunts me to this day. I'm gonna start by saying I was in butthole in high school. I didn't realize how much words could hurt, and I said a lot of things I regret. This was AP biology. I don't even remember what the teacher said as a lead up, but this one socially awkward kid made an incredibly nerdy joke that nobody laughed at. In my mind I said, "God, what a freak." I turned to my friend to make a less hurtful joke, only to find a look of shock on his face. Turns out I didn't just say it in my head. I had said it aloud. I am not a quiet person. I swung back around to find him lowering his head onto his desk while the rest of the class stared at me with looks of disgust, horror, and some even shook their heads at me. My teacher had been talking when I said it and apparently didn't even notice and kept going with the lecture. TLDR. Kid made a nerdy joke in class. I said, "What a freak," out loud. I remember having someone say that to a comment I made in class. Some girl called me a freak and everyone else laughed. I never felt more little than my high school years. When I was a kid, I once asked my mother what she was preparing for dinner. She said, "Fish, chips and salad." Bright Spark replies with, "Yuck. I loved fish and chips, but that's what I said." Then I felt bad. I had bread and water for dinner that night, alone, in my room. My dad made sure to say loud enough from the kitchen, "Well, since Tasty Animal will not be joining us, can I have his ice cream?" I cried. Trolled. Drunk, with some girl that likes me but the feeling isn't mutual. Wandering back to my place. The realization kicks in that she doesn't want to just crash round at mine and wants to take things further. Drunk brain is cool and declares, "I got this," and decides to state to the girl, "I'm sorry, but I just don't find you physically attractive," as by way of ensuring I get to sleep alone. She bursts into tears and literally runs off. I slept really well that night, but upon recalling it I grimace. Got some pretty angry texts from her friends the next day. My dad had lost both his job and his mother a handful of months apart and was feeling adrift. Going from being the vice president of a company to being unable to get a job anywhere really depressed him, compounded by the unexpected death of his mother was undoubtedly crushing. I was 18 at the time and was still in my being a shithead phase, but even I knew then to walk on eggshells around my dad. However, without thinking, one day I called my dad an unemployed bastard after he threw an empty soda can at my head for being a smartass. I'll never forget the look of anger and sadness that played across his face before he left the room. I heard later from my sister that my dad had cried that evening and it made me feel really low. Making your parents cry is one of the worst feelings. Same thing happened to me. Some kid in my health class's mum had just died in a car accident or something a couple of weeks before. He came up behind me before class and said, "Hey, are we doing prac today?" Without thinking I said, "No, we're doing your mum today." Then I realized who it was. Awkward. Common acrophobia. FTFY. I used to live with one of my girlfriends. She had confessed to me in the past that one of her biggest fears was that she would develop schizophrenia like her brother, which was a pretty legitimate fear based on genetic predisposition statistics. In the middle of an argument over something trivial, I yelled at something like, "You're turning into a crazy bee." I meant it in the vague sense that her reasoning was silly and didn't make sense, but whatever it was that I said came out like I was saying that she was insane. I immediately realized that what I said sounded bad, but it was too late. I've never seen someone look so hurt by a statement in my life. She's probably forgotten it, but I never will. No, she hasn't. Open mic night at my school and a blind guy gets up on stage and starts murdering a Metallica song, solo, with an acoustic guitar. I said something catty to a friend, who chastised me. "Friend, he's blind. Give him some credit." Me, "That doesn't affect your hearing." I hate myself when I think of this moment. I don't get it. It doesn't affect your hearing. I was once taking to some friends and mentioned how I hated a non-present friend's mum. I said she was emotionally unstable and didn't know how to look after her children. Then I realized non-present friend's sister was there. Yeah, she was pretty offended. My first aid CPR professor was talking about her son and she said he had a 50 IQ. I burst out laughing because I thought she was kidding and it sounded funny. Everyone stared at me including the professor. Then she went back to discussing her developmentally disabled son. FML. Wrong website bro. Crap, man. I had successfully repressed this memory. My friend's mother had recently passed away, shortly before the friend's wedding. In fact, it was a huge deal. She was crushed and emotionally the wound was still fresh. And what do I do that weekend while hanging out? Without even thinking, I make a freaking your mom joke to her. I immediately apologized but I don't think I'll ever forget the look on her face as she emotionally shut down for the rest of the night. It was a huge deal. She was crushed. Ambiguous pronouns. Sometimes when I'm around my friends I forget to put on my mask and become brutally honest about things, especially if I'm jealous. I told one of my friends that she was acting like a W because she was leading on 6 different guys at once. She cried and I felt like crap. Later I found out it wasn't really her fault. They were all kind of creepy guys and were way too obsessed with her. She didn't encourage them, really. She was just pretty and nice and they were lonely. I was playing ball hockey in the summer and we were losing in a friendly. I was in net and an autistic buddy of mine, nice kid but hard for him to communicate verbally, was on defense. The opposition came in a 2-on-1. I called for him to play the pass. He went for the carrier, and they scored on a one-timer. Normally, I'm calm and composed but, because we were losing, I was already pretty heated. At that point, I just snapped, throwing my helmet on the ground, smashing my stick over the crossbar, and yelling at the guy, "Name, what the frick are you doing?" I took a water break and composed myself after but it turns out he went to the men's room to cry. I know that these happen in the heat of the moment but, still, it's inexcusable to do something like that. I apologized to him after but still bugs me today. A co-worker of mine had this horrible, jealous, obese wife who wouldn't allow him to talk to any girls, including me, even though I was just a co-worker. I absolutely hated her. One day this kid walks into work wearing this dumb shirt that says 3 cows and a picture of a burger or something. I see it and without thinking say like your wife. I immediately felt terrible. When I was in 3rd grade I got in an argument with a good friend of mine who was Jewish. One time we got in a fight over something I don't even remember, and then I yelled I wish Hitler was still alive so you would be locked up in one of those cages like in Wolfenstein. We would play Wolfenstein on the computer. I would move around and he would shoot. We were back to usual the next day but I will never forget that phrase. I was at work in the break room, and there was this woman that I worked with. She was known for sleeping around with the vendors. I work at a grocery store. We were talking just fine earlier that day about her computer issues she was having. Well, another guy had bought a can of tuna and was going to dump the juices in the trash can, and she freaked and said, "Go dump those juices in the sink." Then I say, "It's okay. We can all say it was that lady who made it smell like tuna." I was implying that she was the one to dump the juices in the trash can, but I didn't know that a vagina was also referred to as a tuna taco. She took it that way. A manager was up there, and he thought it was funny. So when she said that she wanted to file a report, he asked if she was kidding. Probably didn't help the situation at all. So I'm confused as to what all is going on, and just head back down to work. After all the smoke clears, I find out that the manager is getting transferred to another store for kidnap because while they were in the office talking, she was about to rush out of the room, and he blocked the door. Funny part is, there is another door out of the office, so he got demoted from manager to checker, and transferred, and the lady got transferred. Nothing happened to me. Still kinda feel bad, but I kinda also don't. Not really any reason you should, to be honest. Awful lot of chaos for such a random little statement though. Impressive. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.